Hi, this is Steve Bonacontri from SOA Consulting Services, continuing our Angular 4 tutorial. Today we're going to talk about CLI, and this is the second part of our tutorial on CLI. We're going to show you some code aspects using WebStorm as well as the command line interface. So let's first take a look at WebStorm and the command line interface. Okay, so we talked about several commands with CLI, which is the ng command, and we talked about being able to create a new project. And when you do that, it takes a little while. Angular CLI creates components. It creates an app. It creates a project with an app folder with some components and some test programs and a lot of things you can use, and eventually it says that the project is created. So if you go first of all, if you do an ngv outside of a project, let's see what we get. I'm trying to figure out what version of Angular CLI I have installed on my desktop. It says 1.0. If you go into the project, it gives you more information. Now, Angular CLI has a version 1.0. I'm using Node 6, but I really want to make sure that I'm building an application and I'm in a project which is using Angular 4. So this shows me all the Angular modules that are installed, and I'm using Angular 4. Now, WebStorm has a similar capability. You can go to a project, you can go to Angular CLI, and you could actually create a project name called My Project. And if you do that, it would take a while to create, but eventually creates all the files on the system. Now, here's my Angular CLI JSON file. It has name value pairs. And it points to all aspects of my project name, my root directory, my assets, my index.html, my main driver, all my test programs, my environment I'm using, my lint configuration, my karma configuration, etc. Okay, so let's go back here, because once you create the project with CLI in WebStorm, you can bring up a command line interface and actually interface execute commands, CLI commands. But let's just take a look at a couple of them. Suppose we do an ng doc and we say, okay, let's look at pipe. What happens? We're going to bring up documentation for pipe, and we see all the pipes. Okay, so that's kind of a useful tool. Let's take a look at this. I'm in my project, and I want to do certain things. Let's suppose let's bring up the command line tool. I have an app component here. I have a module, and I have an app component. And now I could do more fancier things, like I could say generate a component called customer. Now what Angular CLI is going to do, it's going to create a style sheet, a template, test spec, the component, and it's going to update the module. So let's see what happened here. Did it do anything to my liking here? So let's see. Oh, it created the customer component, like it said it was going to do. And then you go in here and notice that it included the customer component. Now what happens when we do something else? Suppose we do an ng generate service customer service. We might find that me adding this SVC was probably unnecessary. See, because it created a dot service and a dot spec file for me. Now the thing is that sort of just annoyed me a little bit here is it didn't really put it where I wanted it to be put. The other thing is it didn't add it as a provider in my module. So let me just get rid of those for a minute and let me just see if there's an easier way to do this. Suppose I did this. Okay, that was better. It created my services file and still didn't update my module, so I would have to I guess that's okay, because at this point I have the option of putting it as a provider here or as a provider in my component. I could actually declare it here. So I guess that's why it does that. But still kind of strange that it didn't create the services directory for me. And it created the customer directory for me, but that's okay. I know how to operate now, and I could figure out how to do. Now let's do this. Let's see what happens when I do ng test. Now, Angular CLI, when I created the project, it did create some spec files and a test.ts file, as you could see right here. And it created an end-to-end directory, which is here. So there's some test here. It gets the text of the H1 and tries to determine what it is. It'll test it for AppWorks. Okay, now while I'm waiting for, let me see something here. While I'm waiting for that, I'm going to take a look at this Angular CLI file again. Okay, so notice my project name is my project, and I have other name value pairs here. I don't like what's happening here. Let me just kill it. Oh, it's starting to compile now all of a sudden. That's one thing I noticed about ng, the command line interface, even with the Webpack. Sometimes things don't behave as they should. It's rare, but there's definitely you change the code and it doesn't change the front end. You change certain things, like just now I tried to run a test and all of a sudden it seems like something's congested there, but it could have something to do with me and my laptop, but it didn't have those problems with LivePack. So anyway, okay, so this is what happened. It ran the test. It ran 5 specs in this case. And obviously it caught my new components, and it tried to do certain things, but we're not going to be too concerned with the results. Bottom line is, when I changed those components and added those components, I should have added certain things. Okay, so let's do some other examples. Suppose we do this. I'm going to get an attribute project.name out of my CLI configuration. Okay, it's called my project. Suppose I do ng set project.name and call it my project 2. And let me get it now. Let me set it back. And now it's back to my project. And we could do a couple more things. Like I said, there's a lot of attributes and command line things you can try. But I think the only other thing I want to try right now is this, which is running the lint to see if there's anything wrong with my code. All files past linting. Just to give you an example what might happen, I could go into one of my other files, my other projects, and do an ng lint, and you'll see, and this is a project I ran that worked fine, but you'll see it complain about certain things in my application code. Now, I've written many projects, even though they're small examples and they demonstrate different functionality of Angular. And they all ran, but what I'm finding now is if I run lint in all these projects, it'll complain about something, which are possible problems. So for example, here it seems like it's complaining about app.module and complaining about certain errors found in my files. But I know that code worked. Well, it worked in Google. So if I tested all the browsers, maybe there could be a problem. So let's go back here and let's see if this works. I think it's called completion. Nope. Oh, there's one more thing I definitely wanted to show you. Okay, yeah, so that's the thing I wanted to show you here, is that I was trying to do an autocomplete here, which didn't work for me. And I think the proper command was completion. And I expected it to do some sort of autocomplete, but let's go and just go through the last command here, which is ng help. Now, ng help will show you all the commands, and what I'll do is I'll pipe that into something, some temporary file. We'll look at it with Notepad. And here you'll see all the commands to build, and you have different attributes for internationalization. This is supposed to add autocomplete to the ng commands, but it didn't seem to work for me. ng-doc worked. nge end-to-end test, it did work for me when I tried it. And as you can see, it's got quite a bit here. So take a look at this when you get a chance. And I read through all this. I guess what I really liked was the deploy options to the URL. And if you go through all the attributes, you'll find that this could be very useful. Okay, so that's all we want to discuss with this tutorial. Feel free to generate this help file and go through all the scenarios and test different attributes and look at development mode versus production mode. Deploy to URLs, do things that you need to do. I plan on using Gulp and automating a lot of things with my Angular apps, but hopefully this will be simplified by the end of the year and we won't have to worry too much about things except pointing to a common directory network. Thank you for attending.